Welcome to Santa Clarita Voices, where you hear the stories, meet the people, and discover the passion that makes Santa Clarita shine. From hidden heroes, local legends, and the visionaries shaping our future, we are uncovering the voices behind the scenes. Santa Clarita Voices is on air.
Welcome to the City of Santa Clarita's podcast, Santa Clarita Voices. I'm City Manager Ken Striplin. One of the many reasons people choose Santa Clarita as the place to call home is because of the green spaces in and around our community. Today we are talking about the city's park system, and joining me is our Director of Neighborhood Services, Jerrid McKenna. Welcome, Jerrid.
Thank you for having me.
Jerrid, why don't you, before we get going, start off by just sharing a little bit about yourself, your history here with the city, and things of that nature.
Oh man, we have a time limit, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So I actually started with the city in 2012 in our recreation department, and I've had, I think, 7 different positions with the city since then. And for the past 4 years, I had the opportunity to be the Director of Neighborhood Services. In that department, we have parks maintenance, facility maintenance, parks planning, open space, and then environmental services.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's pretty broad. You have everything from parks to environmental services. Going back, you had 7 jobs in less than 12 years or 13 years, something like that?
Yeah, and actually the first 6 years I had 6 different jobs.
So I think when I first met you, and I love to tell this story, Jerrid was actually running youth sports out on the fields when I think my oldest son was playing flag football. And Jerrid was were you the youth sports coordinator, or what were you doing then?
Yeah, so I was I'm glad you brought that up. Usually that story that you tell starts with me being a referee or somewhere in aquatics. But I was the program specialist in youth sports. So really responsible for the daily operations of all the youth sports programming. And that's where, I think Matthew was playing flag football at that time on one of the fields.
Yeah, and that's, I bring that up because as you talk about being the Director of Neighborhood Services, which is obviously a big job where you're looking at multiple functions, overseeing them throughout the city, you started kind of on the front lines. And so being out in the sports, being on the fields, you had a kind of a firsthand introduction, if you will, which as you go through, because you have young kids as well,
Yep.
As you go through sports with your kids on the fields, it's one of the best places to get a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
You get them from parents, you get it from the kids on the field, you get it all the way around. So great opportunity, I think, to start in the parks and then end up kind of overseeing the whole function. Yeah. So as Neighborhood Services Director, we're focused kind of on parks. What is your function, so to speak, as the Director of Neighborhood Services as it relates to parks?
Yeah, so it's really, I'm glad you brought up the first part of starting on the front lines and providing really the program part of the service that we provide in the city. Now we're on the back end, right? And so in order to provide the high quality services and programs that we have, you have to have the infrastructure, right? And so you don't have the feedback that we get from the parents if you don't have the fields. They're not striped the right way. The quality just isn't there. And so in neighborhood services, our main goal is to provide that quality infrastructure so that the programs, it's frictionless. They can go out there, the facilities are in pristine condition, the courts, the fields, the classrooms, the libraries, all of that just works seamlessly. And there's a lot that goes into that. We have, on the maintenance side, we probably have 60 full-time staff between facilities and parks. That's all they're focused on, is that you almost don't want to know they're there. The facility's open, they're great, and the programs can just work.
Yeah, and when you talk about parks and the high-quality infrastructure, we do our public opinion poll every 2 years, and parks maintenance or satisfaction with parks is always one of the highest-rated services that we provide to the community. I think last year we were in the 94th percentile in terms of satisfaction with park services. So certainly a testament to you and your staff in terms of keeping those parks and the pristine, mostly pristine. They get a lot of use. And so I think that's one of your challenges as the director is we have everything from football to soccer to lacrosse, cross country, softball, multitude of sports, which only gets bigger each and every year, and those are all year round.
Right.
And so trying to manage those fields in a way that you can keep them up to a certain standard, but still allowing use is obviously one of the big challenges that you face.
Yeah, and it's I like to tell people when I talk about what we do in parks maintenance, we have guys that are borderline chemists when they're working with the turf out there. They're using different blends of seeds, constantly trying to figure out how can we up the quality and raise the bar from last year, and they're just all in. They're dedicated to doing that each and every year. And then the staff that we bring in, they buy in from day one, and we just continue to get better.
You brought up an interesting point, and having 4 kids and raising my kids on the fields as well out here in different sports. One of the things I hear more and more is you talk about different blends of seeds and so on. Is that during certain times of year the parks are brown, and everyone's like, "Why is the grass dead?"
Yep.
And so maybe you can talk a little bit about why is the grass dead, Jerrid?
So it's not dead. Happy to report. And I know we've done a better job with communication, I think, in outreach in this area. It's not dead. It's Bermuda. It goes dormant. It takes a nap during the winter seasons because it's actually very sturdy. And so the way that it can survive through the harsh winter and those cold mornings that we get and the amount of use is the Bermuda blend grass that we use. And so it'll yellow in the winter, but I can guarantee you it's not dead.
Good. Well, interesting fact, which I learned several years ago in the budget process when we started moving to Bermuda is a different type of grass. It doesn't necessarily go straight up. It kind of grows sideways. And so when you're maintaining that requires a whole different level of infrastructure to maintain.
Yeah.
And I think I remember the first time that we switched over and we were changing over the lawnmowers and the things of that nature. And I remember the first one I think cost more than 2 of my cars combined.
Yes.
So it's definitely an investment, but certainly lasts longer and is a better overall investment for the field itself. So as we talk about the park system, Santa Clarita is known for quality of life. There's certain staples of Santa Clarita that come to mind when you think about us, and that's, quality education through our school systems, whether that's the elementary schools, the high schools, junior high schools, the colleges that we have out here. Another thing is public safety. The crime rate is super low out here. It's a very safe place to live, and people feel that. And another part of that is the park system and the parks and recreation system. So from your spot, what really makes our parks system so special?
Well, I think we have a couple things. I think proximity, right? So we've got 38 parks. I think by the summer we'll have 40 with Hart Park transitioning from the county, which we could probably get into later. And so you've got 70, 80 square miles in the city, and you've got a park within reach, of your neighborhood, and they're not just turf, right? So when we look at how our parks are made, they're very diverse in the footprint. So you've got now very complex play structures. I think the city council's approved, over $1 million in some situations for one playground that fits all the needs for all ages. And then we experiment with different features and amenities. Like if you look at West Creek, there's a newer cutting edge, basketball play amenity, and we've got pickleball that we've installed at new parks. And so it's really something for everyone. And it's not just a piece of grass where you've got to bring your own equipment and kind of create your own adventure. We kind of bring that to people.
No, and I think that's a good point. You talk about the city council has really, for as long as I've been here and before that, prioritized the parks and recreation system. And you mentioned we're at 38, we'll be at 40 by probably summertime this year. And I think as you go back and kind of do a little bit of the math, when we took over and incorporated as a city, we had very few parks. I think we had 7 or 8 parks, something of that number. And then we have built and added another almost 30 parks since incorporation. And as you look at that, we're basically have added a park every year and a half to 2 years since incorporation. And that is just an amazing accomplishment when you look at what the park system means to this community and the council's investment over the last 30 years or 35 years, and what that really has added to the community. And so as we talk about some of these new things, you brought up one thing I do want to talk about is the differences in building parks 10 years ago, 15 years ago versus today. And so you mentioned a couple of big things that we hear quite a bit about. Pickleball is one of them. Yeah. So that's certainly a new pressure point for us as we look at building new parks and how do you fit in all these amenities. Right. Field space for all the different sports has always been a challenge in terms of the number of sports here in Santa Clarita that you have to accommodate and trying to get everyone squeezed in. But one of the more interesting things in terms of changes I think that we've seen, and you mentioned it, is West Creek Park. And West Creek Park was a park that we built about 5 years ago or so, 5 years ago, maybe a little less. But it was a big investment because it was really a different way of looking at how we do playgrounds. So talk a little bit about the all-inclusive park that we did with West Creek, as well as Canyon Country Park.
Yeah. So Canyon Country was sort of that first time we went all-inclusive. And there's a slight difference. All of our playgrounds try to incorporate inclusive play elements. And that's been the standard practice, I think, for the past probably 7-8 years, maybe longer. But then you have an all-inclusive playground. So Canyon Country was the first, and what that means is basically every element that's at that playground is accessible for children of all needs and all ages and all abilities. And so you've got everything from, wheelchair accessible zip lines. And kind of that's the gauge of where we went with Canyon Country and West Creek in trying to create something on both sides of the community where that access is available.
Right. And as you look at the attendance of those two playgrounds, every time, I'm at West Creek Park often, it's incredible to see that those things are packed at all times of the day. So certainly a very successful endeavor. Some of the other, as I mentioned, we built several parks over the last 35 years, and that still one of our big, initiatives as we move forward today. Right now, we've got a bunch of exciting things coming up as it relates to parks. Why don't you talk about a few of those? Yeah,
so I do want to mention, in the last year, we rehabbed Bouquet Canyon Park. And so it's got a very similar feel to what you see in the all-inclusive parks. It's completely redone. And to your point, Bouquet Park is right by where I live right now. And so it's where I bring my kids most often. Pre that rehab, you had a couple people going there. You definitely had a lot of pickleball players because we refurbished those courts. But when you do a new playground, that investment, it almost creates a new park. Like people see it and they'll come and they'll go, I didn't know this was back here. And I didn't know there was a softball field. I didn't know you could play pickleball. I didn't know you could play basketball. And so you have that investment in one amenity, and it's kind of a revamp of the whole thing. But what we have coming in the queue this year is we'll be opening Northbridge Park. And that's kind of a joint effort with the school district. So they'll use that.
Saugus Elementary.
Yeah. And so they'll use the school will use the playground during the day, during school hours, and then it'll be open for the community on kind of nights and weekends. We've got Haskell Bike Park, which I'm very excited about. That'll come this year. Getting ready to bring forward a recommendation on construction of that, and that'll be 15 miles of bike trails and amenities and pump tracks and kind of an event space to provide kind of that first unique opportunity for that demographic and that those trends. We've got Hart Park, which again is another kind of milestone achievement. I know you and I have talked before. That's been kind of in the docket for decades, probably.
One of my first projects when I was hired at the city was to try and get that transferred to Santa Clarita, and that was almost 30 years ago. So congratulations on moving it across the finish line there.
I don't want to keep score, but no, I'm kidding. It's these things take time. I've learned, and it's you can't rush the process. But
and I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's every time we talk about that, I feel the need to make sure that we recognize 5th District Supervisor Catherine Barger on that. She really was a champion of helping bring that to the city and moving it from county's maintenance and ownership to the city's ownership. And that's really what pushed it over the edge. And she was a fantastic partner with the city and really helped in that endeavor. So
and then we've got David March Park, so the expansion of that park. So that will add a basketball court, shade over the playground, a restroom, a brand new ball field, parking. I know your favorite, another staircase, which was your idea to put at Central Park, and has been a huge success. And we get a ton of feedback on that. And so hopefully that'll lessen the burden at that location or provide that, exercise opportunity for others. And then we've got a new playground at Begonias Lane Park. And that one's cool for me. So I grew up, my practices actually when I was playing basketball when I was probably 7 to 9 years old was at Begonias Lane. And I remember it was, the playground. I couldn't tell you about the playground. I don't think I ever used it. But putting something over there in that community for, I think it's our second oldest location and playground. Bouquet Canyon Park was, I think, the oldest. And so now getting to do those rehab projects again, the excitement about being able to drive a whole new demand and traffic to that location through that amenity will be great.
Yeah, and I know you paid particular attention to keep the benches that were on the side of the courts, because those have a special place in your heart as you were coming up playing basketball. So
Okay,
we appreciate keeping the history with the old with the new and carrying that forward. So
I knew we were going to hit this point at some point in the podcast.
And you just mentioned a few. Obviously, there's even more than that, and
Absolutely.
that's sometimes it's hard to. We have so much going on at one point here that it's hard to keep them all together. But Old Orchard Park is going through a whole revamp. So that's a park that is, as we grow older as a community and as a city, our focus is moving away from developing brand new parks, because most of the city is becoming more and more built out. So now we have to go back around and start picking up and looking at those parks that were actually built 50 or 60 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, as you mentioned, it's an opportunity to look at the new demographic of uses at those parks and rebuild and create a whole new level of excitement in different communities. Yeah. And I think that's one of the exciting things about parks, is that people take ownership of parks within their communities, right? Like you're talking about growing up near a park, and that was, meant something to you. Another interesting fact is, Santa Clarita Park has its own history, and people go there and they wonder, like, what is this, like this steel
robot park?
Why is there a robot in the middle of the thing, and why is it fenced off? And it's funny, guys that are a little bit older like me, we think back to when we were young and at parks, then we used to actually play on those structures. You don't have to be old.
You don't have to be old, because I used to play on that.
Yeah. So how much has changed just in playground design and those kind of things? But obviously, as we went to rebuild and rehab that park, that robot was important to the community to kind of preserve that, and so that's why we have the historical robot, if you will.
It's so funny.
At Santa Clarita Park.
When I first got this job, that's another park that I fondly remember, because my parents played co-ed softball when I was growing up in the city program, and most of their games were at Santa Clarita Park. And so I grew up on Robot Park. And when I first took over, I'm like, can we reopen that? Just as a nostalgia thing. I got shut down at every building in safety. It just doesn't mean it's just
going down a steel slide when it's 110 degrees outside and the sun's beating down on it tends to leave a mark.
Exactly.
Another park that we didn't talk about is Via Princessa Park. And why don't you talk a little about Via Princessa on the east side of the city, an area that we don't have quite as many park acres per population. Talk a little bit about what we're doing there.
Yeah, so it's going to be 4 new multi-purpose fields, so fields that can accommodate soccer, football.
The location is
at the Metrolinx, right behind the Metrolinx station on the other side of the Via Princessa, other side of the train tracks. And so we're actually going to develop that property into 4 multi-purpose fields, a restroom, a playground, a walking path around. And the unique part, and really what made that possible, is the involvement of Measure W. And so as part of that, there'll actually be an infiltration component where we're capturing water, cleaning it, and it's going back to use, basically.
So for the average person who says Measure W, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does Measure W mean?
Yeah, so Measure W is a property tax that was passed
by LA County.
By LA County.
Not the city of Santa Clarita.
Not the city. We did not pass the property tax. However, as a city, we're the beneficiary of some of those funds. So those funds is LA County measure, but there's a local return that comes back into Santa Clarita. So that money will be put toward that park to help, one, put the infiltration, but then contribute to the construction of the project.
Right, definitely one of our most challenging parks that we will construct over time. Getting access, we have to go underneath the railroad tracks just to gain access. There's about 26 acres on the other side of the railroad tracks, but for everything from protecting the property from the river, which runs adjacent to it, to access, and then the building out, and then the infiltration, will definitely be a huge investment on the city's part, but probably one of the most impactful, just based on the population, the number of parks within the area, and bringing those additional parks recreations to the east side of the community.
Absolutely.
You touched on a little bit, and I want to go back because it's really a big deal, and I don't think most people know how much of a big deal I think it's going to be, which is the Haskell Bike Park.
Yeah.
We own over 200 acres up Haskell Canyon. Right now, we have an archery range, which people may not know about that as well, but there is an archery range up there, and this Pike Park you mentioned the individual amenities that go with it, but that spans about 120 acres or so.
Yep, it'll use up about 100 acres of that property.
So you're talking about probably something that there's no similar place like that in Los Angeles County.
No.
You got to go to kind of a real bike park that has like chair lifts and things like that to get to.
Privately owned, too.
This one you have to pedal yourself, right?
Yes. Full workout.
There you go. But that's going to be a huge amenity, and like you mentioned, that'll be coming to the council here shortly, and hopefully about a 6-month project to construct. So by the end of summer or so, or around summertime, that would be amenity that would be opening up to the public. So another great opportunity. Jerrid, you talked a little bit about Hart Park and that coming on board here with the city, or city taking over around July 1st, I think is the scheduled date. Keeping our fingers crossed on that. Hart Park is a very different animal, so to speak. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Hart Park and why that's a different park for us, and what does that come with?
Yeah. So Hart Park William S. Hart Park is the last county-owned park within the city boundary. And so, like you said, that we're looking for that to come into the city's fold. July 1 is the target date for full operations. It's a 156-acre park, and the unique parts about that park is we've got a museum, at the very top of that park, and then we've got animals, and basically a mini zoo that we're going to have to coordinate and ramp up operations to take care of. But then historic buildings throughout, and so and then we've got bison on the property. So we don't do any of those services right now, and so but we've been in that situation before where we've taken on amenities and not really had the service before and figured it out. Most recently with the the cube. We weren't in the ice skating hockey business, and we've done that, and the staff have done a great job. So I'm confident we could do well, but it's a really a precious site for the community with the history that's involved there, the artifacts. I think there's over 6,000 artifacts that will come into our possession to maintain, but make available for the community to learn and absorb. As part of the culture.
Yeah, and it's definitely you mentioned a few of those amenities. The other thing that it has is camping. It has a campground.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, Hart Park is kind of tucked behind the gates and not really advertised much, not a lot going on there. We have certain events that we do hold there, but on a daily basis, probably not the primary park that people are looking at now.
Right.
It's a great opportunity for the city to kind of bring that to life, bring it to the community, introduce it to the community. You talked about, obviously the bison. That's definitely unique. You have bison running around a park. What other animals they have?
Oh man, there's an ostrich, there's ducks. I think they just adopted a cow. There's a donkey, there's a horse. There's chickens. It's a variety of animals that come in through there, and the team is ready. They're ready to step in, and they're excited about that opportunity.
Good. Well, it's a huge opportunity for the city to take that over and, like I said, breathe new life into it. Also, a great opportunity for the community to experience an amazing park with so many different amenities right here in the center of Santa Clarita. So, thank you for that. In addition to parks, another big priority that the council has set forth that is under your purview of executing is open space.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about this concept of an open space preservation district and what that means for us as a community in terms of what we're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so the Open Space Preservation District was passed by the council and adopted in 2007 as a 30-year measure. And so those are local funds, used solely by the city, and we have control over, which is unique.
All of the money.
Yeah, all of the money. We're not sending some to LA County like a lot of the other measures. And so that has been exclusively used to acquire open space and really create a green belt around the city. And when we say green belt, it's really a buffer of all the preserved open space. It kind of separates us and makes us unique from all the other cities kind of down in the basin, San Fernando and below. And so as part of that, our team is actively looking at how do we create that seamless connection. And it's, I want to say probably 70-80% there today. Job's not done, but we're still after it. I think the last year we secured another 500 acres that was approved by the city council, and we're tracking this year probably another 1,000 that are in the docket.
Yeah, that's a huge accomplishment when you think back to 2008. What the goal was, what the vision was, and the council really stepping up to make that happen. And 13,000 acres is a lot of open space.
Yeah.
And as you talk about that buffer is to create, it kind of stops development at the borders and kind of creates everything within Santa Clarita, and then separates us from everything beyond those borders. So obviously a constant work effort. properties come and go, and it's constantly looking to find out where are those opportunities to make those connections. And it's not just the buffer; it's also about the wildlife. And it's creating those wildlife corridors and preserving the ability for wildlife to traverse through the different national forests and things of that nature. So definitely has been a big effort. An initiative directed by the council, and certainly something that staff and under your purview has done a great job looking at. So going back to parks. So as you talk about parks, one of the big things we're seeing more and more, we're hearing more and more about, just had some big news yesterday about it, is artificial intelligence and technology and how much it's changing everything we do on a daily basis. And so it's also changing parks maintenance a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about AI and technology and parks maintenance.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that as well, and the kind of the integration of technology has been a really big factor in kind of my leadership style and bringing that into the operations, whether it be on the back end where residents don't really see it. And by that, I mean, we're looking at software to really streamline the workflow for facilities and parks to become more efficient, more effective in the turnaround time and how we deal with either broken playground equipment that comes in and that feedback, and how do we get that executed quicker. So we're using integrated software from AI and doing demos right now to bring that on board. But then there's the AI that I think residents will start to see. Some of that is actually implemented today with a robot line striper that we brought on, I think two almost 3 years ago. And so residents may see it. It's used at Central Park. It's probably 2 feet by 1 foot. It's a small piece of equipment, but highly effective. And what I mean by that is that one machine probably cuts what we used to do by hand by 60%. Wow. And so we used to have multiple staff, manually lining a field, mixing paint, going out with the spraying equipment, and it would take 4 to 5 hours. That machine can do it in 45 minutes.
And you can literally put together a stencil and tell it to go paint lines, draw pictures, do whatever you want.
Fully autonomous. We've had it out there for certain events and occasions, painting the stenciled lines, and you program it on an iPad, and we have newer staff that came in that took on that responsibility and that creativity, and we foster that. We want new ideas. Yeah,
that's great. I know some of the new ideas, a couple that have come across my desk and I've had to turn down, is you wanted your face on Central Park fields, and we thought that was a little too much. So
and branding
future.
Yeah. We do call the robot striper Kenny though, so I want to make sure you get some love in there.
What is one of the most unique requests or tasks your staff has had to do to provide customer service to our residents?
These stories are all over the place, but our guys are out there every day, and they probably interact almost as much as some of the other staff that are running the programs because they're just there at the park, right? And so, and residents out here, I think they know when they see the city seal, they don't really recognize it's a different department and they're just maintenance professionals. They just need help with something.
Right.
And so one of the best stories since I've been here is that, somebody lost their wallet, at Central Park, and we had one of our staff members, took the initiative to, look it up, find the address, and actually go deliver the wallet back to the resident. And that's, it's a small thing, but they replicate that, almost weekly. And I get
the resident had no idea why the parks guy was coming up and knocking on his door, right?
Right. And it's, most of the time you could disregard it. It goes into lost and found. They probably never get it back. That's not our staff, right? It's what can we do to create, an opportunity for an interaction, a positive interaction that really goes toward the overall quality of life provided in this community that's unique, that you won't get anywhere else.
Yeah. And the great part is, I talk with the parks guys a lot, and one of the things that is pretty consistent amongst them is when they say that, when they came to work for the city, they were going to work in the parks and really didn't feel like they would have much interaction with residents.
Yeah.
But they're always surprised to see how interactive when they're out there working on the ball field, they're mowing the grass, doing irrigation, whatever it might be, how engaging the residents are with them in terms of just saying good morning, saying hello, saying thank you for keeping up the parks. So it really is, I think, a cool interaction that they really do have high standards, and the residents recognize those high standards and appreciate those things. I know we're going to be wrapping up here soon, but one of my favorite stories in terms of parks going the other mile, so to speak, is I remember, our residents they have very high expectations, and whatever it might be, they have very high expectations, which of course we love. But we got a call from an individual who I think was at a concert. And she was complaining about the mosquitoes or the bugs flying around. Yeah. And in most cases, in most cities, I'm pretty sure if you called, you're not going to get much of a reaction to that. It's a park, it's grass, it's kind of what it is. Right. But our staff, it's amazing. Our staff they listened to the complaint, took down the information, did research. They called the mosquito abatement district and really dug into it and tried to come up with different best practices on managing those types of insects or whatever it was. And they brought back like 2 or 3 new best practices in terms of what time we water, how much water we do, and all this other stuff, just to try to make an impact on what that resident called in and did. And I tell you that to me was a great example of our parks guys going, the extra mile to try to solve a problem based on the residents' expectations. Yeah,
and it's a philosophy of ownership and accountability that that thanks to you that you promote throughout the city, where they feel empowered to do that. Right, and a lot of that, the red tape that organizations and cities get kind of criticized for is we don't have that because we allow staff to kind of take that leap of faith and experiment to find solutions that are creative.
Yeah. So as we start to wrap up, I want to just touch a little bit. We mentioned it a little bit in the beginning. I think one of the things that helps you be as successful as you are, obviously you have a tremendous staff, a great support system that works with you. But also I think it's your connection to the community. Yeah. And you mentioned growing up in the community, you went to Canyon High School.
I did.
Right? Yeah. Played a little bit of basketball.
Just a little, yeah.
And then you have since moved, you stayed in the community, you started working with the city, you got married, and you have how many kids?
I've got 3 kids, three young boys.
Yeah. How old are they?
7, 5, and 2.
7, 5, and 2. And so that's like the ages where they're starting to, in the last year or two, get into sports. Yep. And you'll be in this sports vortex for like the next 12 years until they go.
It feels like 12 years already. Yeah.
And so being a former athlete and involved in the city, how often do you get talked into coaching?
I'm currently coaching 2 different basketball teams right now, and that seems to only expand every year, and that's only with 2 kids in programs right now. So, and that's another tie-in, kind of full circle. Is I'm using all of the amenities and facilities on a regular basis, and so I go out there on weekends, not dressed in the suit, and I'll see the feedback, and then on Monday morning it's we've got to fix a couple of things.
That's right, and they always know you work for the city.
Yeah, somehow.
Obviously, I had 4 kids, and most of them are still in the sports programs. But being out in the field, coaching, being involved, being present really gives you a unique perspective, not only on what the field conditions are and things that are happening, what people feel, but also gives you that extra buy-in is that when you go out there, you want to make sure that you're providing the best possible service because your kids are also using those services.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. With that, Jerrid, I want to thank you for taking a little time to chat with us and talk about the park system. Yep. You and your staff are doing a tremendous job. Like I said, 95% satisfaction rating from the residents here in Santa Clarita, and being out there on a weekly basis, I can tell you I appreciate what you do as well. So thank you for all that you do, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening to Santa Clarita Voices. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Santa Clarita Voices. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share. You can find Santa Clarita Voices on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the city's YouTube channel. Follow the city on social media at City of Santa Clarita. We'll see you next time.